What defines genius? Is it the ability to invent something that changes the world? The ability to unite nations in times of crisis? Or perhaps the wisdom to transform words into legacies that echo for centuries? On the stage of history, few figures have shone on as many fronts as Benjamin Franklin, printer, author, inventor, scientist, diplomat, statesman, philosopher, and even a volunteer firefighter. He was not just a witness to the creation of a nation, he was one of its chief architects. But who was the man behind the familiar face on the $100 bill? How did a boy of humble origins, the 15th of 17 children of a candle maker, become one of the most influential and beloved figures in American and world history? Get ready for an extraordinary journey through the life of a man whose insatiable curiosity and practical spirit not only shaped America, but also taught us valuable lessons about hard work, virtue, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. This is the story of Benjamin Franklin, from his humble beginnings to his immortal icon. Stay with us, because you are about to discover how a single individual can truly change the world. Our story begins on January 17, 1706, on Milk Street in Boston in what was then the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Benjamin Franklin was born into a large, hard-working Puritan family. His father, Josiah Franklin, an English immigrant, was a candle and soap maker, a respectable trade, but one that offered little prospect of wealth. His mother, Abiah Folger, was Josiah's second wife and was known for her sharp mind. Benjamin was the 15th of 17 children and the youngest son. From an early age, he demonstrated a lively intelligence and an aversion to monotony. His father initially dreamed of dedicating him to the church as a tithe of his children in the service of God. So at the age of 8, Ben was sent to the prestigious Boston Latin School. He excelled, but his stay was short-lived. The family's financial difficulties took their toll, and after less than a year, he was transferred to a less expensive school that focused on writing and arithmetic, skills considered more practical. At the age of 10, Franklin's formal education came to an end. He began helping his father make candles and soap. Benjamin hated the work, the smell, the routine, the lack of intellectual stimulation. It all bored him. He longed for the sea, dreaming of adventures on merchant ships, an idea his father promptly discouraged, especially after one of his older brothers was lost at sea. Josiah, noticing his son's unhappiness and fearing that he would run away, tried to find a trade that would appeal to him. He took him to observe various craftsmen in their workshops, carpenters, masons, turners. But it was in the workshop of his older brother James, a printer, that Benjamin found a glimmer of hope. At the age of 12 in 1718, he signed an apprenticeship with James, pledging to serve him for 9 long years. The world of printing fascinated the young Franklin. He loved books and now had unrestricted access to them. He devoured every copy that arrived at the workshop, often staying up all night reading by candlelight. He read Plutarch, Daniel Defoe, John Bunyan, and the essays of Addison and Steele in The Spectator, which he deeply admired for their clear and elegant style. Determined to improve his own writing, Franklin developed an ingenious method. He would read an article, jot down the main points, and a few days later try to rewrite it in his own words, then compare it with the original. He would even transform prose into verse and verse into prose to expand his vocabulary and command of sentence structure. His relationship with James, however, was strained. James was a demanding and sometimes tyrannical master. He often berated and even beat Benjamin, who felt exploited and undervalued. Despite this, Benjamin quickly learned the trade and became a skilled printer. In 1721, James Franklin founded the New England Courant, one of the first independent newspapers in the colonies. The paper was known for its critical and satirical tone toward the Puritan authorities in Boston. Young Benjamin was eager to contribute his own writing, but he knew that James, jealous of his talent, would never publish anything signed by his apprentice brother. It was then that Franklin, at the age of 16, created his first famous pseudonym, Silence Doe Good. She was an eloquent and observant middle-aged widow who wrote letters commenting on the customs, politics, and social life of Boston. At night, Benjamin wrote the letters and slipped them anonymously under the door of the printing shop. To his surprise and delight, James and his friends loved Mrs. Doe Good's letters, praising their wit and style. They published them in the Courant, and the letters became an instant hit with readers. Benjamin kept the secret for a while, relishing the anonymous recognition. When he finally revealed himself to be the author, James was furious at the deception and at his younger brother's popularity, which further soured their relationship. The situation became untenable when James was imprisoned for a few weeks in 1722 for criticizing the colonial government. During this time, Benjamin took over the publication of the paper and did so competently, including some satire of his own. When James was released, he was forbidden to continue publishing the Courant under his own name. To get around the ban, the paper was published under the name of Benjamin Franklin. James, resentful, had Benjamin sign a new secret apprenticeship contract, while the old one was publicly canceled to give the impression that Benjamin was the real editor. Franklin felt exploited, taking advantage of a particularly heated argument with James, and knowing that his brother would not dare reveal the secret contract, Benjamin decided to break the agreement and run away. At the age of 17 in 1723, he sold some of his books to raise money and secretly boarded a ship to New York, seeking a new life and the freedom he so longed for. In New York, he found no work as a printer, but he heard that there were opportunities in Philadelphia. So he undertook the arduous journey to Philadelphia, arriving in October 1723, dirty, tired, and with little money in his pocket. His entry into the city became legendary. Starving, he bought 3 large loaves of bread and walked down Market Street with 1 loaf under each arm and eating the 3rd. It was on this occasion that his future wife, Deborah Reed, saw him for the first time and was amused by his disheveled appearance. In Philadelphia, Franklin quickly found work in the printing shop of Samuel Keimer, an eccentric printer. His skill and work ethic quickly attracted attention. Pennsylvania Governor Sir William Keith was impressed with the young man and promised to help him set up his own printing shop, even financing a trip to London for him to purchase equipment and make contacts. Trusting the governor's promises, Franklin set off for London in 1724. However, the letters of credit and recommendations promised by Keith never materialized. Franklin found himself alone and destitute in the English metropolis. Far from despairing, he found work in the great London printing houses of Palmer's and Watts's, where he further honed his skills and learned about the latest printing techniques. During his 18 months in London, he also indulged in the pleasures of the city, but he continued his program of self-education, reading voraciously and debating ideas. In 1726, Franklin returned to Philadelphia, brought by Thomas Denham, a Quaker merchant, who offered him a position in his shop. Denham became a father figure to Franklin, teaching him business and accounting. Unfortunately, Denham fell ill and died the following year, and Franklin returned to work for Samuel Keimer. Determined to be independent, Franklin, in partnership with Hugh Meredith, a fellow printer of Keimer's, whose father had financed the venture, opened his own printing shop in 1728. Franklin was the driving force behind the business, a tireless worker, often seen hauling paper through the streets in a wheelbarrow, demonstrating his trade. He quickly gained a reputation as a quality and reliable printer. In 1729, he bought out Meredith and became sole owner. That same year, he acquired the Pennsylvania Gazette from his former employer, Keimer. Under Franklin's editorship, the newspaper became the most successful in the colonies, known for its informative content, witty advertisements, and witty essays. many written by Franklin himself. On September 1st, 1730, Benjamin Franklin entered into a common law marriage with Deborah Reed, the same young woman who had seen him arrive in Philadelphia in rags years earlier. A formal marriage was not possible because Deborah had previously married a man named John Rogers, who had abandoned her and whose whereabouts were unknown. Without proof of Rogers' death, she could not remarry. They had 2 children who survived infancy. Francis Folger Franklin, who died of smallpox at age 4, a tragedy that led Franklin to become an advocate of inoculation, and Sarah Sally Franklin. Franklin also had an illegitimate son, William, whose mother has never been publicly identified, and who was raised in the home of Benjamin and Deborah. But Franklin's most famous and profitable printed work was undoubtedly Poor Richard's Almanac, published annually from 1732 to 1758 under the pseudonym Richard Saunders. Almanacs were popular publications at the time, containing calendars, weather forecasts, poems, astronomical information, and trivia. What set Franklin's almanac apart were its witty proverbs and aphorisms, full of practical wisdom about frugality, hard work, and virtue. Phrases such as, "The early bird catches the worm," "A penny saved is a penny earned," and "Never put off until tomorrow what you can do today" became part of American folklore. The almanac sold about 10,000 copies a year, an extraordinary number for the time, making Franklin a relatively wealthy man and a well-known figure throughout the colonies. By 1743, at the age of 37, Benjamin Franklin had achieved sufficient financial success to begin devoting himself to other interests, especially science and philosophical investigations. He gradually withdrew from the day-to-day management of his printing business, establishing partnerships that provided him with a steady income. Electricity was at the time a mysterious phenomenon and a major scientific novelty in Europe. Franklin became fascinated after watching a demonstration of electrical experiments by Archibald Spencer in Boston in 1743, and later by Adam Spencer in Philadelphia. He acquired equipment and began his own systematic studies. His approach was practical and ingenious. He proposed the theory that electricity was a single fluid present in all matter, and that bodies could have either an excess, positive charge, or a deficiency, negative charge, of this fluid. He coined terms that we still use today, such as positive, negative, battery for a set of capacitors, conductor, and load. His most famous and perhaps most dangerous experiment occurred in June 1752. The exact date is uncertain. Franklin theorized that lightning was a form of natural electrical discharge. To prove this, during a thunderstorm in Philadelphia, he flew a kite with a metal tip at the top. The kite string was made of hemp with a metal key tied close to his hand and a silk thread, an insulator, connecting the key to his hand, keeping him dry under cover. When the kite string became wet with rain and became conductive, Franklin observed that loose fibers of the hemp string stood on end. By bringing his knuckle close to the key, he saw sparks fly, proving the electrical nature of lightning. He also managed to charge a Leyden jar, an early type of capacitor, with the electricity from the lightning. It is important to note that this was an extremely risky experiment. Others who tried to replicate it recklessly were killed. Franklin was lucky and cautious. The practical application of this discovery was immediate and revolutionary: the lightning rod. A pointed metal rod connected to a cable that ran to the ground. It was installed on top of buildings to attract lightning and conduct it safely to the earth, preventing fires and damage. The lightning rod saved countless lives and property, and was perhaps Franklin's most celebrated invention, making him internationally famous as a scientist. But Franklin's inventive genius did not stop there. Suffering from presbyopia, difficulty seeing things up close, and myopia, difficulty seeing things far away, he grew tired of constantly changing glasses and invented bifocals, cutting the lenses of 2 pairs of glasses and assembling them into a single frame. To heat homes more efficiently and with less smoke than open fireplaces, he designed the Pennsylvania stove, later known as the Franklin stove, a metal stove that radiated more heat and consumed less wood. He also mapped the Gulf Stream, a warm ocean current in the Atlantic, to speed up ship travel between America and Europe. He invented a type of odometer to measure postal distances, the glass harmonica, a musical instrument, and even a flexible urinary catheter. Notably, Franklin never patented his inventions, believing that they should be freely available for the benefit of all. He wrote, "As we enjoy great advantages from the inventions of others, so we should rejoice in the opportunity of serving others by any invention of our own, and this we should do freely and generously." His scientific work earned him international recognition. He was elected a Fellow of the prestigious Royal Society of London in 1756 and received the Copley Medal, the equivalent of a Nobel Prize at the time. Universities such as Harvard, Yale, Oxford, and St. Andrews all conferred honorary degrees on him. Dr. Franklin was now a worldwide scientific celebrity. Benjamin Franklin was not just a man of ideas, he was a man of action, deeply committed to the well-being of his adopted community of Philadelphia. He believed that citizens had a responsibility to improve the society in which they lived. In 1727, as a young man, he founded the Junto, also known as the Leather Apron Club. It was a weekly discussion group of young artisans and tradesmen who met to discuss issues of morality, politics, natural philosophy, and business, as well as to promote self-improvement and the common good. The Junto became a hotbed of ideas for many of Franklin's civic initiatives. One of the Junto's earliest accomplishments was the establishment of America's first subscription library, the Library Company of Philadelphia, in 1731. At the time, books were expensive and scarce. The library allowed members to share the cost of purchasing books, making knowledge more accessible. This model inspired the creation of similar libraries in other cities. Franklin was also concerned about the safety of the city. In 1736, he organized Philadelphia's first volunteer fire company, the Union Fire Company. He wrote articles on fire prevention and the need for an organized system, overcoming initial resistance and establishing a model that was widely copied. Franklin was also involved in paving and lighting Philadelphia's streets, organizing a police force, night watch, and improving the city's sanitation. He proposed and helped found the Philadelphia Academy in 1749, which later became the University of Pennsylvania, advocating a practical curriculum that included not only the classics, but also modern languages, sciences, and skills useful for commercial and public life. Concerned about public health, he played a key role in the founding of Pennsylvania Hospital in 1751, the first public hospital in the American colonies, which also served the poor. He organized a fundraising campaign and persuaded the Pennsylvania Assembly to provide public funding. His influence on civic life was so great that he was appointed Postmaster General of Philadelphia in 1737, and in 1753 he became Assistant Postmaster General for all the British colonies in North America. He reorganized the postal system, making it more efficient and profitable, improving routes and frequency of deliveries, and introducing home delivery in some areas. Through these and many other initiatives, Benjamin Franklin transformed Philadelphia into the most advanced and cosmopolitan city in colonial America, demonstrating his principle that the most acceptable worship to God is to do good to man. Franklin's civic involvement naturally led him into politics. He was elected clerk of the Pennsylvania Assembly in 1736, a position he held for 15 years, and in 1751 he was elected a member of the Assembly itself, representing Philadelphia. He became an influential leader, advocating for the interests of the colony, especially against the power of the Penn proprietors, the family that held hereditary control of Pennsylvania. During the French and Indian War, 1754-1763, a conflict between Great Britain and France for control of North America, Franklin played a crucial role. In 1754, he represented Pennsylvania at the Albany Congress, a meeting of delegates from several colonies to discuss a common defense against the French and their Indian allies. It was there that Franklin proposed the Albany Plan of Union, one of the first formal plans to unify the colonies under a centralized government with a president general appointed by the Crown and a Grand Council elected by the colonial assemblies. To promote this idea, he published the famous political cartoon, Join or Die, which depicted a snake divided into segments, each representing a colony. Although the Albany Plan of Union was rejected by both the colonies, who feared losing their autonomy, and the British Crown, who feared a unified colonial power, it planted an important seed for the future union of the colonies. During the war, Franklin demonstrated his organizational skills by securing wagons and supplies for General Braddock's expedition against the French. He also advocated the creation of a colonial militia and the construction of forts on the frontier. In 1757, the Pennsylvania Assembly sent Franklin to London as its agent to defend the colony's interests before the British Parliament and the Crown, particularly in the dispute with the Penn family over the taxation of their lands. He remained in England for 5 years until 1762. During this time, he made many influential friends, traveled in Europe, and continued his scientific studies. He fell in love with London life and European culture. Franklin returned to Philadelphia in 1762, but the peace was short-lived. Tensions between Britain and its American colonies were growing. British imperial policy after the war, especially the imposition of taxes such as the Stamp Act of 1765 to cover the costs of the war, had generated great resentment in the colonies, who argued that there should be no taxation without representation. In 1764, Franklin was again sent to London by the Pennsylvania Assembly. This time, his mission was to try to persuade the Crown to take over the government of Pennsylvania, taking it away from the Penns. However, the Stamp Act crisis soon dominated his agenda. Franklin initially underestimated the intensity of colonial opposition, but quickly realized the gravity of the situation. He testified before the British Parliament in 1766, arguing eloquently against the Stamp Act and explaining the colonists' determination. His performance was brilliant and contributed significantly to the repeal of the act that same year. This episode greatly enhanced his reputation in both America and England, but he remained an advocate of the unification of the British Empire, believing that differences could be reconciled. However, the continued imposition of other British taxes and restrictive measures, such as the Townshend Acts, began to erode his hope. The 1770s saw the spiral of distrust and conflict between Britain and the American colonies intensify. Franklin, still in London, tried desperately to mediate the situation, but his efforts were increasingly frustrated by intransigence on both sides. A turning point for Franklin was the Hutchinson Letters affair in 1773. He obtained private letters from Massachusetts Governor Thomas Hutchinson and his deputy Andrew Oliver, in which they advocated restricting colonial liberties. Franklin sent these letters to leaders in Massachusetts, hoping that by exposing the evil intentions of specific individuals, blame would be diverted from Parliament as a whole, facilitating reconciliation. The effect was the opposite. The letters further inflamed colonial public opinion against Britain. When his role in the leak was revealed, Franklin was publicly humiliated before the British Privy Council in January 1774, accused of treason and theft. He bore the attack with stoic dignity, but the episode convinced him that reconciliation was unlikely. Relieved of his post as Postmaster General, Franklin returned to America in March 1775, just days after the outbreak of hostilities at Lexington and Concord that marked the beginning of the American Revolutionary War. His wife, Deborah, had died in December 1774, and he had not seen her for a decade. Immediately upon his arrival, Franklin was elected a delegate from Pennsylvania to the Second Continental Congress. Despite his advanced age, he was 69, he threw himself into the revolutionary cause. He served on numerous committees, including the one that drafted the Declaration of Independence, alongside Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Roger Sherman, and Robert Livingston. Although Jefferson was the primary author, Franklin made some important edits, including the famous change from sacred and undeniable truths to self-evident truths. Upon signing the Declaration, he is said to have remarked, "We must indeed all hang together, or we shall certainly all hang separately." In September 1776, the Continental Congress made a crucial decision to send Benjamin Franklin to France as a commissioner to seek military alliance and financial support. France, Britain's historic enemy, was the most likely candidate to help the fledgling American nation. Franklin's arrival in Paris in December 1776 caused a stir. He was already world-renowned as a scientist and writer. With his simple fur hat, spectacles, and unassuming demeanor, he personified the image of the rustic New World sage, which charmed the French, who were steeped in the Enlightenment and their admiration for virtuous simplicity. He became the toast of Paris, his image emblazoned on medallions, engravings, and even snuff boxes. But behind his charming facade, Franklin was a shrewd and persistent diplomat. He skillfully navigated the complexities of the French court, cultivating friendships with influential figures and patiently arguing for the American cause. The task was not easy. France was hesitant to openly support an uncertain rebellion. The American victory at the Battle of Saratoga in October 1777 was the turning point Franklin needed to convince the French. On February 6, 1778, he, along with other American commissioners, signed the Treaty of Alliance and the Treaty of Amity and Commerce with France. This alliance was absolutely vital to American success in the war, providing troops, ships, arms, and money. Franklin remained in France as the chief American representative throughout the war, managing diplomatic affairs, securing ongoing loans, and countering British propaganda. His prestige and popularity were invaluable assets to the American cause. With the end of the Revolutionary War, signaled by the British surrender at Yorktown in 1781, a victory made possible by French naval and land support, the next major task was to negotiate a peace treaty with Great Britain. Benjamin Franklin, along with John Adams and John Jay, was appointed to this crucial mission. The negotiations in Paris were complex. The interests of France and Spain, France's ally, did not always align with those of the United States. Franklin, with his experience and diplomatic tact, played a key role in balancing these alliances and securing the best terms for America. He resisted French pressure not to negotiate separately with the British, and, together with Adams and Jay, secured a remarkably favorable agreement. The Treaty of Paris, signed on September 3, 1783, formally recognized the independence of the United States and established the new nation's borders, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River. It was a diplomatic triumph that cemented the military victory. Franklin remained in France until 1785, beloved and respected. Upon leaving the country, King Louis XVI presented him with a miniature portrait studded with diamonds. His return to Philadelphia was triumphant, and he was hailed as a national hero. Despite his advanced age, nearly 80, and health problems, including gout and kidney stones, Franklin's public service was not over. In 1787, he was chosen as a delegate from Pennsylvania to the Constitutional Convention, which met in Philadelphia to revise the Articles of Confederation, the weak system of government then in force. Although he did not actively participate in the day-to-day debates due to his health, Franklin's presence lent enormous prestige and wisdom to the convention. He was the oldest delegate and a unifying figure. In times of impasse, his calm words and humor helped to ease tensions. He advocated compromise and the need for a strong but balanced national government. One of his most significant contributions was his final appeal for unity at the conclusion of the convention. Acknowledging that the proposed Constitution was not perfect and that he himself had objections to certain parts of it, he urged all delegates to sign the document in the name of the common good and the need for effective government. His speech, read by James Wilson because of his weak voice, was a powerful appeal to pragmatism and patriotism. He famously observed, referring to the sun carved on the chair of George Washington, President of the Convention, "I have often, in the course of this session, looked at that sun behind the President without being able to tell whether it was rising or setting. But now, at last, I have the happiness of knowing that it is a rising sun and not a setting sun." The United States Constitution, with its innovations in federalism and separation of powers, became an enduring model of Republican government, and Franklin's conciliatory wisdom was instrumental in its adoption. In his later years, Benjamin Franklin continued to be an active and respected figure. He was elected president of the Supreme Executive Council of Pennsylvania, an office equivalent to a governor, for 3 annual terms, from 1785 to 1788. He also devoted time to writing his autobiography, a work that would become a classic of American literature, detailing his rise from poverty to prominence through industry, frugality, and self-improvement. Although unfinished, the autobiography inspired and continues to inspire generations of readers with its life example. Even toward the end of his life, Franklin did not abandon his moral convictions. He became an increasingly vocal advocate for the abolition of slavery. In 1787, he became president of the Pennsylvania Society for Promoting the Abolition of Slavery. One of his last public actions was to send a petition to the United States Congress in 1790, calling for an end to slavery and the slave trade. Benjamin Franklin died at his home in Philadelphia on April 17, 1790, at the age of 84. The cause of death was pleurisy. His funeral was the largest ever seen in the city, with an estimated 20,000 people attending to pay their last respects. News of his death reverberated around the world. In France, the National Assembly declared official mourning. Benjamin Franklin's legacy is vast and multifaceted. As a printer and writer, he shaped American literary culture and public discourse. As a scientist and inventor, he unraveled the mysteries of nature and created tools that improved everyday life. As a citizen, he founded institutions that promoted knowledge, security, and public health. As a diplomat and statesman, he was indispensable in the fight for American independence and in the creation of a new form of government. He embodied the spirit of the American Enlightenment, the belief in reason, progress, individual freedom, and the human potential for self-improvement and the common good. His life example, as a self-made man who achieved success through hard work, insatiable curiosity, and dedication to public service, has become an American archetype. Benjamin Franklin was more than a founding father. He was a sower of ideas, a catalyst for change, a beacon of practical wisdom. His life is a testament to what a curious, engaged, and virtuous individual can accomplish. He taught us that true greatness lies not in grand deeds alone, but in the consistent application of intelligence and goodwill to improve the world around us, no matter how small. From a humble candle shop in Boston to the halls of power in Europe, from the electrical experiments that tamed lightning to the wisdom that helped found a nation, Franklin's journey is a perennial source of inspiration. He reminds us that knowledge is power, that virtue is its own reward, and that service to others is the noblest of callings. America, and indeed the world, is still reaping the rewards of Benjamin Franklin's extraordinary life. His story is not just a chapter in the past, but a manual for a brighter, more ingenious, and more humane future. He didn't just invent the lightning rod, he helped invent modern America itself.
If this story has already captivated you so far, Just imagine what's yet to come. So don't waste any more time. Subscribe to the channel now, activate the bell so you don't miss the next episodes, and leave a like. This will really help this content reach more people who, like you, are passionate about history. And take the opportunity to comment below. What other character or historical moment would you like to see here? Your suggestion could become the channel's next video, so you can be part of this journey.